real quick, who am I? Oh, do we have to wear this?
Sort of.
Please hold. Technical difficulties, apparently. How are we both supposed to wear this?
Whichever other way.
Put it like here.
He'll just have to like whisper into my ear or something.
Okay. Put it right here. Right in the middle of the chest. In the middle of the chest.
Right here,
Middle
right?
of the chest.
Right here?
Middle of the chest. In the
I've
middle.
never given a presentation with like one of these.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can write
Wow,
a
Joe.
kit, but
All right, I'm just going to hold this. Cool. So let's give everybody a chance to read what's going on. Third talk, probably last talk because I'm graduating and moving, but maybe not. Maybe I'll come back and give another one. I did CCDC Blue Team for 3 years. I Red Team 3 years at UB, which is a competition that's going to happen in November. If you haven't done one, sign up. I was co-captain of RITSEC Red Team 2 years ago, and I don't know what happened last year, but I was on the Red Team still. And then I did 1 year of assist, except that competition doesn't exist anymore. Also, we've been throwing together presentations last minute, like you guys will do sometime soon. And I'm not sick this week, which is super exciting. Also, you might notice the theme with a little like geometric stuff. That's because I recolored it. That's how you make things interesting. You got to keep it fresh.
so I'm Micah. I started off doing like blue team for CCDC, and I did male. Then I realized blue team male sucks, so I did red team male because that's more fun. Then I got on the UB red team, did that 3 times, I think, 2 times in 17, 18, IRSEC red team, and Kyle told me, hey, you're doing a presentation with me, so hi. I also hate exchange, so yeah.
Cool. So basically our talk, as Nick was trying to describe, is just going to be an overview of like Red Team, like the goals of Red Team and all the competitions, how we work, and then we're going to kind of go over some like the history because we've been on Red Team for like a few years now, and it's good to give some perspective as to like how the developments have been going and then where we're at now. Because we're looking for like some new faces to step up and get involved, and so it's good if everyone has an understanding of where we're at. So first, what is Red Team besides being the elite hackers that make your day really sad at competitions? Well, in order to understand what Red Team is, we have to talk about Blue Team real quick. So basically, as a Blue Team, you're given a network to defend. You've got like a crazy amount of boxes to defend, and your team is like pretty ill prepared, but you're trying. Maybe you didn't sleep much this week, but it's all right. You're going to make it through, and you've always been told this is how you learn things. So here you are being thrown into the fire and really ready to start your day. Your goals are just to defend your network, to keep your services up for the business and do some business injects. And most importantly, what every Blue Team wants to say is to kick Red Team out. That's why you're there, right?
Funny.
So, of course, the antithesis of that would be the Red Team goals, which is we just facilitate the fun, right? We're there to just make sure everyone has a great time. We're trying to be quiet. We don't want to be caught too early on. We want to just be a little sneaky until we feel safe in our bets, and then we'll start ramping things up a little bit over the course of the competition. We'll make the pain start coming towards the end, and then we just have some fun. Another one of our goals is to keep some access. So basically, our goal is to be on you from like minute 0, right? We want to press a button and then have all of the shells, and we want to keep every single one of them the entire competition. That's really our goal. That's the challenge we're providing to the Blue Teams, and it's the Blue Team's job to try and kick us out. And the way we do this, right, is we try to measure Blue Team performance. That's the whole point of having a Red Team, is to try and figure out which Blue Team defended the best. And I have a little quick, another animated Google Slides example of how that actually works, right? So imagine we have a competition with some 6 teams, and Red Team is attacking all of them, right? Our goal is to attack all of them pretty evenly so we can figure out which Blue Team deserves to win. And the way we usually do this, we just set the bar for Blue Teams, and we just figure out what you guys do, or whoever. So, for instance, we might launch some kind of Red Team attack, like just turning off your service, see if you're paying attention. And then what's going to happen is Blue Teams will realize their service went down, investigate the issue, and then they'll fix it, or at least some of them will. And the ones that didn't will kind of start falling behind, and that's like the goal, is to keep throwing more bars to separate people. Now, you might have people that find the bar a little late, like Team 5 here, and so like they'll still make it past that bar and keep going. However, like they'll still be a little bit farther behind each other team, right? And our goal is basically to keep tossing these bars out, like some kind of network attack next, to see which team is able to cover the most ground the best, right? So keep making the attacks more difficult, just more intense and like technical, until like the best team comes out on top, and then everyone ends up losing anyway. Cool. So you want to talk about the challenges?
Yeah, so we have a couple problems as Red Team. One of the things is keeping shells, and you guys like are in our way. You try and stop us, so sometimes like, hey, do we have anything on this box? No, and it's like crap. Like rush in, do everything we can do to get back in. The other thing is like sometimes it's really hard to be fair. Like we're like, oh, we focus on good teams, and good teams have like all their stuff down, while someone who was kind of sitting over there didn't know anything. They have all their services up because we didn't view them as a threat. So it's kind of hard to like balance that out. We also like leave a trail, but like that's kind of purposeful because we want blue teams to find things. We want them to have a report at the end. So it's like finding that balance of like we want access, so we don't want you to find us, but we want you to find us so you have something to report on. So that's kind of another challenge we have to do. And then the biggest thing too is documentation, and this is our biggest struggle as a red team is like what did we do? So afterwards the competition, when you guys write up your reports, like, hey, did you actually like RMR at this file? And we're like, I don't know, there was maybe 20 of us in this room. Did someone RMR at this file? But so it's just kind of hard. So, and that's kind of our biggest struggle is documentation on what we've done and who we've done it to and like when we did it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's also really important for like blue teams learning, right? So like at the end of a competition, if you got like wrecked or like a bunch of stuff happened to you, like red team's not there to make you feel bad, right? We're here to like make people learn. And so like it's a lot easier to do that if we have a report per team and say this is what we did to you, this is like what you didn't catch, this is what you did catch, good job, and try and improve blue teams from there. Because I guess at the end of the day, a lot of the improvements that we're making on red team is to try and better blue teams. Because as red team, we have all this time to prepare like a bunch of tools. We've got like a bunch of people with super amounts of experience. And at the end of the day, red team keeps evolving, right? And we want to try and raise the bar for blue teams so that when blue teams go into the competition for the first time, right, they're a little bit farther ahead than the last set of blue teams, which is kind of what we're trying to do as red team. So now we're going to talk about some of the cool shit, which is basically like the history and evolution of some of the stuff that we've had. One of the big pushes that we've had in the past couple of years is to be a lot more open about the shit that we're doing to blue teams. Part of it is to help blue teams learn, right? Like that, if we do a bunch of stuff to you and we break all your services and you don't know what we did, it doesn't help blue teams. So being more open about the tools that we're using and trying to get more people involved in like development of that, because it's a lot of work. So Micah will talk about this.
So we kind of started with nothing, and we went in, we're like, Kyle and I, we'd sit in the labs, and we're like, hey, we want to hack stuff. What do we got? Nothing. So we started learning what we thought were super advanced and sneaky and really fun tricks, like bash RC and function hooking and like netcat shells, and we thought we were so cool. So what we ended up with was a bunch of like bash scripts, really. And we didn't know what to do. So we're just going to kind of show off here a couple of our bash scripts. So
very early red team stuff.
Very early red team.
So back in 2016, little freshman Kyle made some kind of really gross and disgusting bash script that's still on my GitHub called Ripjaw. And the most impressive piece of this, like most impressive part of this malware was most definitely the ASCII art at the top. That was like the coolest thing. But all it really did was trying to keep persistence on a box, right? This challenge that red team has where we have to try and keep access to boxes so that we can keep performing attacks, right? And so how it worked is it just hooked systemd services to like run itself again, right? And as it ran, it would reinsert itself in all these different systemd files, and it would curl like commands down from a web server and run them. So it's pretty shitty, actually.
50% of version 1 was swear words.
Yes.
As you can kind of see at the bottom. So then Kyle had access, so I was like, let's screw with them. So I made a big, giant nuke that would spin on your terminal, and you just couldn't do anything. So kind of sucked, but you know, I was learning. Then after that, we found out devu random exists, and you can shove all this crap into people's consoles using this little script, and it just hits everyone. So if you have a shell open, you lose your shell. So that was, again, like kind of like PostX. We already have your box, thanks to Ripjaw, that elite malware, and now we're going to kind of annoy you.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the deployment.
Yeah, so in order to like deploy all that stuff to a box, we were like, oh shit, we should probably get this on their box, otherwise we're not going to be able to use it. So I wrote this really janky like SSH Python script that uses paramiko, and it just like literally SSHs to a box and like runs something. And it's super slow, barely ever worked, and was a huge problem. Because when you think about it, right, deployment is one of the most important things to get right as red team, because if you don't hit all the teams evenly, then it's not going to be a fair competition. You want to make sure that every team is affected like in the same way. So we'll talk about some of the issues with what we had now.
Yeah. So these kind of sucked, really, and they didn't work good for red team. They were ghetto. There was like 50% chance this stuff would deploy. And then, yeah, so what we learned, we kind of learned what we did wrong. We learned what we could do better. We needed better persistence. We were getting kicked out. We needed ways back in. We needed faster, more even distributed, and more reliable deployment that would get us on all the boxes. And we needed more like management. We didn't really know what was going on. Kyle was doing his thing. I was doing my thing. Just had like 30 terminal sessions open up on our screens, and that was how we knew what was going on.
We basically just like SSH'd into people's boxes because we had like creds, or they didn't change the creds, right? And we would like attack people throughout. But the problem was there's no organization behind it. It was hard to keep track of who we've been doing what to, what people had what malware on them, and overall like that leads to an unfair competition because teams are getting attacked unevenly, right? So we'll talk about some of the improvements that we started, I think either 2 years ago or a year ago now. One of the big things last year as I was preparing ISTS, we always talked about how we should script deployment and then we could sleep. We'll have the night that we can sleep, which by the way didn't happen, but we did use Ansible. And what I found out about Ansible is it's, who here knows what Ansible is, by the way? I don't know, people here that helped out with last year's ISTS would know. But for those of you that don't, Ansible is basically just a infrastructure as code tool. It lets you kind of remotely define like different boxes and services, like what packages should be installed, what services should be running, what configuration files should be used. And it lets you kind of like use that code to deploy to different boxes. And from a red team perspective, we were like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So what we were going to do is we were just going to use Ansible to have all these like misconfigured services, like we'll backdoor your SSH config, maybe we'll drop a few binaries and run them, like a couple services, stuff like that using Ansible. Which actually was like a really cool idea, except the problem was we needed to do it all in a split of a second, right? As soon as we hit enter, it needs to happen because blue teams are starting to secure their boxes. And if it doesn't hit, like for instance, if it hits team 1 before it hits team 5, and team 5 had more time to secure their box, that's not fair because now we have more malware on team 1 than team 5, and team 5 is going to do better than the competition unless we really start focusing on team 5, in which case like we can't just keep doing that, right? Like you understand the problem with like focusing attention. And the problem with Ansible, I guess, is it was just too slow. Like for DevOps, it's great. It's pretty reliable in that sense, but it doesn't like deploy evenly very quickly. And then when you start doing some of the asynchronous stuff that Ansible had, just for red team, it was too complicated, I guess, in the sense that it wasn't reliable enough. Also, it wasn't super easy to use for Windows. We had to kind of pre-configure the Windows boxes to be able to work for Ansible, which isn't really something that you can do in a competition because you don't have access. So that was one of the challenges. And then this whole thing came out that I shilled a ton, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because half the people in the room have heard me talk about this for like hours, and then the other half don't know what this is. But basically, I made like a little project that was designed to like try and centralize red team activity. It was basically like a botnet, and we would have all of our interaction going through this, and it would log them as it happened. And so we could kind of report back to blue teams and to white teams the stuff that we did to different teams. And what was really cool was that it allowed you to group teams together so that you could launch like the same attack against a bunch of different places instead of just individually SSHing to each box to run a command.
Also, what it allowed is for each of us all the red team members could go to one place to manage the boxes. So if I wanted to run a command on a box, I could log into the same place Kyle was logging into to run these commands. So it just kind of brought us all together, more of a team and less of an individual doing your own thing.
It was definitely a focus around like red team workflow and like being able to see what other red teamers were up to as well was kind of a cool part of it. But there were definitely issues with it. So for instance, like the back end like was not well written. This is definitely a learning experience. Just like my experience with this was like, how do I do web? How do I do like database stuff? And so at the end of it, it was kind of like messy all over the place, a lot of duplicated code, but it definitely helped me learn Python better and a bunch of other stuff. So it was worth doing. And also the UI. So basically how I did it is, has anybody here used IPython? Anyone know what that is? IPython? Cool. All right, well, IPython is basically like an interactive Python shell. And actually, Python has these libraries that IPython uses to kind of generate like autocomplete. So it's kind of like a bash shell, but cooler, right? So you can see like the autocomplete is here. And that was kind of the UI, I guess, in a sense, is just you have this shell that you can like pop a bunch of different commands into and do stuff. But overall, not very intuitive to use. It took like a lot of explaining to different people on how to use it, and it was kind of messy. So goals to improve that. Oh, and then we got to talk about some persistence. As you'll notice, we're both like very focused Linux people, so we have some Windows stuff on here occasionally. But we've got the shout outs to Russ and Adler because they do the majority of the Windows stuff, and Wumbo on workplace also does a lot of the Windows stuff for Red Team. But we learned basically that the bash scripts and the bash hooking and stuff like that wasn't enough. And we wanted to go a lot deeper. So we looked into this a lot and did some research on different types of implants and malware. And we found rootkits. And we were like, oh, that seems cool. What is a rootkit, right? And for those of you that don't know, basically rootkits can hide files, network connections, processes, and kind of make you invisible on the machine. Or at least that's the goal. So here are some starter points for those. I'm sure there'll be more talks of those as we go in the future throughout RITSEC this semester. But Azazel is a cool LD preload rootkit that basically loads a library before all the other libraries, and it lets you like hook different functions. And then Tsutsuru is a cool kernel module rootkit that lets you just kind of overwrite system calls in Linux, and that's kind of how you could hide those files, processes, and network connections. For Windows, just ask Russ and Adler. I don't know, it's complicated. I would not do it justice to explain what I know about what they do. So I'm sure, as Russ gave a talk earlier today on it, I'm sure there'll be more Windows-related talks. But the main issues with our persistence right now are that we need more coverage. Like a lot of times it'll work on Ubuntu, but it won't work on Cent for some reason. And so to try and make it more portable across operating systems is really important, so we don't have to refactor it as much. Also, we want to do cool shit. Like that's half the battle. Is just like we just want to go deeper. We want to go cooler. We just want to make the most sexy malware you've ever seen, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of research. So that's what we're working on in persistence. Cool, and now we can talk about where we're at today, which is really the important part. So if you've been kind of zoning out, just like come back in, because this is the part where we're like, we need help. So I think Mike is going to take away the next slide. Cool.
So, yeah, what we basically realized is not just having all these things running on their boxes, that's half the battle. The bigger half is us working together. We talked about the challenges, even distribution of everything, knowing what's going on, knowing who's doing better, who's doing worse, and that all comes down to infrastructure. So you have a lot of benefits. We can get all the team's data in one place. We can get a single command and control. We kind of talked about that. And we get the whole red team to work together. So that's kind of the benefits of this. But the challenge is there's like a lot of large projects. It's a lot of programming. We're writing tools that work on the back end. And making everyone's tools work together always seems to be a problem because we all have these super unique tools, but getting them to talk to each other is pretty difficult. And then a lot of them are ghetto. Like some of this stuff is written up at 4 in the morning in the labs, and then the next day we're on to the next tool. So like it kind of half worked, and we're like, oh, this is great, and then we never touched it again. So like kind of trying to stabilize everything so that we can all work together. And then just kind of like malware is the more fun stuff. So infrastructure is kind of like, oh, well now I gotta like write like code that works most of the time. It's just like, so it's kind of a lot less fun for us to do, but this is kind of what we're trying to focus on because this is really what's going to help give the better experience to the blue teamers, and that's kind of our goal throughout this. So we have a bunch of public projects. This one's Det-Cord, so we talked about deployment, just rapidly deploying. That's exactly what this does. It's more stable, it's fast. We tested it out at RITSEC last year. It worked phenomenally. Leaves a lot less evidence, so you may not see traces of what we were doing, which is kind of good for us at some parts. But there's still a lot to do. So like if you want, and this is these projects are here because they're like, hey, that looks cool. I would like to work on this. This is why we're giving this presentation. If you want to get involved with the red team, please reach out. So like lots to do still, and as far as all the projects we're about to go through, like this is a call for help.
Cry for help.
Cry for help.
You have beautiful eyes, by the way.
This one's
Okay, so the next thing is Nexus, which is basically going to be a centralized database for Red Team. We've always kind of had like a bunch of like payloads that we were hosting on some random sketchy Apache server somewhere, and then we've got like some other implants elsewhere, and we've got like some sessions calling back, and now we want to manage all this SSH stuff. So it made a lot of sense for us to have one centralized place to track all the information, right? It lets us kind of make different judgment calls and automation around like different events that are happening. So for instance, if we discover a new host on a network, or if we're launching a scan against a host and we realize that it's been snapshotted, we can automate like a recovery process. So we can automate like just sending our malware back at it and deploying to it again, right? And that's one of the problems that we realized. So the goal of this project basically is to solve that and to make a little bit better of a UI than Arsenal had. So it's going to kind of absorb some of those responsibilities as well as provide some other additional functionality. The biggest issue with this is that it's a huge project, and I'm definitely looking for help. It's not necessarily front-end dev, although if you wanted the front-end for me, feel free. But definitely, like, so there's some really cool Python stuff that's going on, and just like the way the back-end is working is, I think, amazing. So I really like to like share like how that's working with some people and try and get some help on this project because it's huge, and I'm one person that has a lot to do, so I can't do it all by myself. And additionally, this year we've been saying it for a while. The goal is to document what red team does and make a nice little PDF for blue teams. I've been saying that for a while, and it hasn't happened because I haven't had time, but this year, please, maybe it'll happen.
We're moving in the right direction.
Moving in the right direction, but if you're interested in this one, come talk to me. Then we've got GScript.
So is actually, we didn't write this. This was written by the CCDC red team. So they do this kind of pseudo-professionally, so they put a lot of time, and this is a tool they open sourced, and it's phenomenal what it does. Basically, you can take all your payloads, wrap them up, and run them. And it runs on Linux, Windows, and Mac. Everything is like a single binary, a single like source of truth that is stable. So we've kind of implemented this. Again, we tested this out last year, worked perfectly for what we were looking for. And so we're kind of trying to move all of our droppers and runners into this framework. So that's also kind of cool. And we're all really trying to work into this because it just really helps out and is made for what we're doing. So why rewrite something that has been written very well for us already?
Cool. Next, I'm going to give a little shout out to the guy with headphones on in the front, Jack. We're doing a new project for a new rootkit called GoofKit that he's working on. I didn't put too much on here because I figured he'll probably give a presentation on it later in the semester. I know that he's been working really hard on it, but basically it's going to take the kernel module rootkit that we all know and love and make it fucking awesome. We're going to have a bunch of just different features on there. We're going to do some really cool like inline hooking and trampolining, and if you don't know what that means, that's a good reason to talk to Jack about it, and he'll talk your ear off about it. It's a really cool project. I wish I was more involved with that, but it's definitely something to look into, especially if you're looking into like Linux persistence. After that, we've got Russ with his like little Windows service thing that's going on, and there's definitely more stuff than this. This is just what we came up with in like 10 minutes ago. But go talk to Russ about the Windows service he's working on. I'm sure he'd love to offer some advice on how to either secure Windows. So if you're a blue teamer, talk to him about how to defeat it because he'll have to be open with you. Or if you're interested in helping, talk to Russ because he's doing that stuff. And also Brandon's got a bunch of stuff too. Sorry for the lack of things, Brandon. Time constraints. Cool.
This is the Pwn board. This was kind of my baby. This was really fun for us last year. It allows us to know who we're attacking and who we need to attack. It allows the entire red team to look at their team and be like, how's this team doing? And we can kind of see in a centralized source. And it's also really good for demoralizing the blue teams because in this picture there's a lot of blue. At RITSEC, there was not a lot of blue. It was all red, which is great for us. So the red team, or the blue teams would look through the door and they'd be like, oh no, I'm on there. And they're like, yes, you are. So they might think they're doing well, but this is the source of truth, and we know really what's going down with that. So shout out to Kyle Schleich, wherever he's at. He put a lot of effort.
Oh, is that there?
Schleich?
Schleich, yeah.
So he put a lot of effort into this semester, so he's making a lot better. But that was so, yeah, it's a really cool tool, and it just kind of helps us kind of be on the same page, back to these themes we were talking about. So questions, like if you're looking to get involved, we'd love to work with you. Any thoughts, anything you want to comment on, ask about, figure out?
You can complain too, like this is a safe space for that.
The guys go easy on us. We're not going to, but we'll listen to your complaints.
Anything from anyone?
Anyone? Okay. All right, yeah, so you have the project names and the people. If you want to look at stuff, you want to work on stuff, you have cool ideas, come talk to us. We're trying to get people involved, trying to expand, trying to make it better. So yeah, definitely give us a shout out if you're interested in this stuff, and we'll kind of coordinate you through that.
Cool.
So.
Hope you appreciated the Deadpool theme. Cool.